Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank my good friend Tom Harkin for spending a few minutes with us today. Anyone who understands progressive politics in America for the last 25 years knows that there is no greater progressive, no one who cares more about those who need help and assistance than my Senator Tom Harkin. He has opened the door for the people with disabilities throughout this country. He is the author and the champion of the Americans for Disabilities Act, and this is an opportunity for me to thank you for that, Tom Harkin. He's also given a great deal of hope to those in rural America with his establishment of the Conservation Security Act in the last Farm Bill. If only we had a president that would adequately fund that Conservation Security Act. So I consider it an honor to be introduced by the Senator. And I want to take this opportunity, as the Senator did, to introduce my wife, Christy. She is seated right over here. Honey, would you stand up? Christy is a classroom teacher of 32 years and is dedicated to making sure that our education system does more than give us a nation of standardized test takers. Folks, I'm going to do something that I don't think politicians normally do when they begin a speech of this kind. I'm going to admit to you that I'm a little nervous. Now, why am I nervous? I'm nervous because the topic of this speech, the topic of this conference, is so extraordinarily important to the future of our country. And the people in this room have made and continue to make and must make the difference for America. And so it is humbling to be here. And it is a little difficult to speak to you today. So you'll permit me, in order to get over this initial nervousness, to talk a little bit about something that I'm confident talking about, which is my belief in this country. I believe strongly in an America that is a place where hard work and hope leads to a life well led. I believe in an America where we have an American bargain with those who work hard. And that is, if you work hard and you get ahead, then you have a responsibility to give something back to your country. I believe that we are a nation where our security and our stability comes from our fervent belief in the strength of community, that we each have a collective responsibility to one another to make sure that not just our lives, but all of our lives are well led. And I believe that this is a country where the only thing more powerful than our military is our generosity of spirit. Unfortunately, the America that I believe in, and the reason I do believe in this is because I've had the fortune of growing up in this country, as Tom said, starting out as an orphan and then ending up talking to you as a governor of the great state of Iowa. But my America is not the America that many Americans see today. My America is not an America that a lot of folks outside of this country see. It's not the America that middle-income Iowans and Americans working hard, working really hard, longer hours, working hard, maxing out credit cards, refinancing their homes. It's not an America where those hard-working middle-income Americans can keep pace with rising housing costs and gas costs and energy costs and health care costs and college education costs. Too few in this country see the benefit of that American bargain. It's not an America where we can talk about the security and stability of community when we have 46 million Americans without the protection of health insurance, where our national commitment to our children's education amounts to no more than an underfunded slogan, where many of those who are relying on pensions no longer have the stability of those pension systems, and we are told that the promise of Social Security and Medicare at some point may be uncertain for future generations. All of this is combined with the fresh memories of a failed national effort with Katrina, and our feeling about community is not as strong as it needs to be. Now, as I talk about community, let me explain to you what I mean by that. The best way I can do that is by relating a story of a recent church service my wife and I attended, where the priest came out and he wanted to explain to the children of the church the gospel he was about to read. It was a wonderful story of the loaves and fishes. You all may be familiar with it. It's a story in which Jesus is giving a sermon. He sees 5,000 hungry people. He says to his disciples, "Go feed the people." The disciples basically take a look at what they have. They have a few loaves of bread, a couple of fish, and they express doubt as to whether or not it's possible to feed 5,000 people. But Jesus said, "Pass the baskets." And the baskets were passed, and everyone was fed, and when they got the baskets back, there was more food than when they started. It is a powerful metaphor for the strength of community, that when we look out for each other, not only do we benefit individually, but collectively, we are stronger and better off. But the priest explained it this way. The priest explained it this way. He said what Jesus did in that story, he's removed the fear of sharing. He removed the fear of sharing. And my concern today in America is that those in charge of our national government are making us more fearful of sharing. They are not removing the fear of sharing with the hope of community. The America I believe in is not the America that many in the world see. A go-it-alone war based on false pretenses and faulty planning and prison scandals overshadows the good work of those who serve us in uniform and leave other nations more fearful of America than inspired. Now, who is responsible for this America? Well, it's pretty clear. Republicans control the presidency, they control the House, they control the Senate, and a majority of governorships. And it seems to me the party of accountability has to begin accepting some of that accountability for the America of today. We are left with a nation that is unprepared for the twin challenges that face us. The challenges of assuring people that we will keep them safe, and at the same time the challenges of a very difficult and competitive economy that is leaving too few with the benefits of that economy. Now, Democrats also have a responsibility, and I'm here to talk just for a minute about that. We have a responsibility to make a compelling case to the American people that we can be trusted to do better, that we can not necessarily point out all of the failures or corruptions of others, but we can put forward a positive agenda for change. We, in essence, can take back America. That effort begins with guaranteeing the benefits of the American bargain to every hardworking American family. That's going to require us to be the most innovative and creative and competitive and independent economy in the world. We must begin to once again create jobs that support families and communities. To do that, we must have a strong labor movement with collective bargaining rights. We must also embrace the challenge that the world has given us to develop more sustainable, more renewable energy sources. We must become the renewable energy leader of the world. But we need to do more than that. We need to create an energy policy in the context of a natural resources policy that ensures that we use our land and our water appropriately. We must also continue to encourage conservation in this country. We must also lead the world in conservation. In order for us to have a competitive, innovative, and independent economy, we must also make investments in our infrastructure. The reality of today is that when you build, economies improve. And it is time for us to renew our commitment to a transportation system that works, a communication system that allows us to communicate all over the world. It's time to put resources into infrastructure and to do it in a meaningful way. That will put people to work, and it will create good-paying jobs that will support families and communities. It's also time to strengthen community in this country by tackling the big domestic issues of our time. It ought to be a disgrace, a national disgrace, that we have 46 million uninsured Americans today. It ought to be a national disgrace that we don't have a program for all people in this country to have access to decent, affordable health care, and that should be a challenge that we as a party accept. We should also make sure that we produce a relevant education for all of our children. As I said earlier, it's not enough. It's not enough to leave no child behind. We must have an education system that makes sure that every single youngster reaches their potential and is the most creative and innovative person they can possibly be. We have to have a revolution in education, not no child left behind. Part of our effort to take back America must also to ensure that we secure the home front by restoring America's integrity abroad. A reliance on renewed commitment to alliances and working with nations, not against them. We must acknowledge that our first responsibility of any government is to ensure the stability and safety of its people, which is why we must have a much more serious effort in homeland security, starting with the nuclear and biological terrorism threat. It is time for America to get really serious about security. It's also time for us to consider the great power of America, the opportunity for America to inspire. The reality today is that what the rest of the world knows about America is that we have phenomenal military might. But I think there's something even more mightier than that. I think we ought to consider a second front, if you will, in the war against terrorism and extremism. In the Secretary of State's office, there's a wonderful letter from John Marshall as an introductory to the Marshall Plan in 1950, where he suggested that our enemy is not a country. Our enemy is a condition: poverty, ignorance, and hunger. The time has come for America to lead an international effort to eliminate hunger and illiteracy and poverty in America and in the world. We have the capacity and the will to marshal the forces of the world, to understand that when there is a malnourished child, there is a failure that we all have to accept responsibility for. Today, there are 375 million malnourished children in the world today, and each of us should accept responsibility. This country is a great nation. This country is a great nation that can tackle great problems, and we have great bounty, and the time has come for us to use that bounty in an effective way to ensure that the people of the world understand that America's might is in its heart and its spirit and its generosity. In order for America to meet the competitive challenge that it faces economically and to establish a second front on the war against extremism and terrorism, it's going to be necessary that we have competent leaders with integrity that speak the truth, competent leaders that can identify with the struggle of American families, and competent leaders that call for sacrifice from all of us. I believe that Democrats can and must provide that leadership. Let me talk to you for just a minute about sacrifice. One of the responsibilities I have as a governor is as Commander-in-Chief of National Guard troops. 9,700 people serve in our National Guard in Iowa. We are but 1% of the nation's population, but we are 3% of the National Guard's population. We have an ethic of service. 42 times I've had to contact families of those who have lost loved ones in either Iraq or Afghanistan. It is by far the toughest thing I do as governor. It's an opportunity to convey to those who have lost a husband, a son, or a daughter the feelings of 3 million Iowans. I will remember all of those conversations, including the one that I had just a few days ago with the family of the first woman who passed away. But the one conversation I will never forget, and the one that I've been telling all of the people I talk to about, is with Aleva Smith. Aleva Smith is the widow of Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith was 42 years of age. He'd been in the National Guard for over 20 years. He was the grandfather of the National Guard. He was the man that 19, 20, 21-year-olds looked up to and asked for advice. He was called to service by his country, and he responded time and time again. He believed in America. And so when his nation called him again, he responded. He took himself away from his wife and 2 children and the community that he loved, from the safety and security of West Liberty, Iowa, and he went to Iraq. His job in Iraq was to fly a helicopter, to ferry troops to dangerous places in that country. On one occasion, Bruce's helicopter was hit by a missile. Now, I was told by those with the National Guard that Bruce had a very split-second decision to make. He could put his own life further at risk, and that of his co-pilot, in the hope of maybe saving those on board. Or he could put those on board at risk in the hope of saving his life. Bruce did what he was trained to do. He did what you would expect him to do. He put his own life at risk. And on that day, he died, as did his co-pilot. 18 people lived that day. My job was to call his wife and to express to her the condolences of the people of Iowa. Now, what is it that you say in that circumstance? You can talk about honor and duty and sacrifice, thoughts and prayers, all of the words that you would expect someone in my position to say. But the reality is that none of those words really can convey what it must be like to someone who now finds herself having to raise 2 children alone. Mrs. Smith recognized I was having trouble, and she interrupted me. And she said, "Governor, I've got this figured out." And I thought to myself, how could you possibly have it figured out? She said, "I have it figured out." She said, "Those 18 men on board that helicopter who lived needed Bruce more in that split second than I will need him the rest of my life." I put the phone down after finishing the conversation, and I sat in my office alone. I realized I'd been in the presence of greatness, the greatness that defines this country, the greatness that brings you all here, the greatness that wants you to take this country back. It's the greatness of an ordinary individual who does extraordinary things. It's the greatness of somebody who understands that the strength and power of America is in those who believe it serves a higher purpose and calls all of us to that common purpose. It's the greatness that suggests that that common purpose, that higher purpose, is something we all should be willing to sacrifice for and work for. It's the greatness that suggests that some, unfortunately, may be asked to give more than others. Some may be asked to make ultimate sacrifices. But there is an acceptance of that and an awareness of that. It is the greatness that has built this country to where it is today. It is a greatness that is not being recognized in America today. It's a greatness in which the policies of the current administration do not recognize and do not support. It is a greatness that calls you to action. So I'm here today on her behalf because I believe that there are millions like her in America. I believe that if we call all of those to a common and higher purpose, that we will respond. I believe that we can become a great nation, a greater nation, that we can tackle the issues of the environment and health care and education reform. I believe we can make safer and better workplaces. I believe that we can provide for greater financial stability for those who work hard. I believe that we can make the dream of college education affordable. And I believe that America can inspire once again. And that's what you believe. And that's why it's important for us in this election and every election to remember what it is about. It is about the greatness of this nation and taking it back, because they've taken it from us. And in doing so, they've lessened our opportunity. And no generation of Americans should let that ever happen, ever.